Thank you for tuning in to Circling Dialogos and my conversation with Aubrey Marcus. So, more about this conversation in a moment, but first some housekeeping. So, if you are interested in exploring the ideas that we discuss in this podcast in a context of fellowship, in a way to not just think about these things, but actually practice them, live them. Here are some things ways you can do that. So we have a the Art of Circling coming up, which is the Circling Practitioner Training, which is about a year-long program. We put it on once a year, and at the time of this recording, we have the next one is coming up October 10th. And so time's running near, and space, it's almost full. So if you have been thinking about that and have been putting off registering or checking out, I would recommend doing that quickly. Information for that and links for that is below. We also have a weekend intensive coming up, and we have a weekend circling intensive about every 6 weeks or so. We also have a drop-in event every Thursday night from 6 to 9 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And all of that is Pacific. Everything's in Pacific Standard Time, and everything's on Zoom right now. All right. Also, if you are interested in working with me one-on-one in a coaching consulting arrangement, email me at guysengstock@gmail.com and just let me know that you're interested in that. And what we'll do is we'll set up and schedule a exploratory session to see if coaching with me is a fit for you right now. Okay. So, Aubrey Marcus. I'm sure many of you are familiar with Aubrey Marcus. He is most known for having started and was the founder of the company On It, which is a supplement company. And he's also recognized as one of the forerunners in the world of psychedelics that have opened up. He was an early experimenter with it and broadcaster of it. So he also has started something called Fit for Service, which is I believe every quarter they have what they call a summit, where about 100 to 200 people show up, and they go through and experience a lot of really rich practices and teachings. And there's a whole community around that. And about a year ago or so, he flew me out to work with his team and do a Circling and Dialogos session with his core circle of people in his team and his teachers. And then afterwards, I did a podcast with him. And before all of that, I flew out a little bit earlier and did an interview with him. So this is that interview. I think we did it about a year ago or so. So mostly this is a deep dive into Aubrey's life and his thought and what it's been like for him having sold On It and what his life is about now. We explore some of his history. We explore his relationship with psychedelics and ceremony and what all that means for him, and much, much more. So I hope you really enjoy this conversation, and thank you so much for tuning in. Does that mean
we're clapped in?
We're clapped in.
We're clapped in. That's the beginning.
Oh, wow.
We get the clap right before we start.
Wow. You mean we're clapped in more?
Indeed.
Yeah. So welcome to your office. This is a special opportunity is I initially asked you to just be on the podcast because you invited me out here to work with you and what you call your family and your team, which is something I wanted to talk about because it struck me talking with all those people, just the quality people that are that you're around, that you call family, was striking to me. And so you flew me out here to do a circling Dialogos 2-day experience with you guys.
Yep.
And so that's what I came out here for. And you were like, hey, why don't we do it, rather than do it on Zoom, to be on my podcast, like, why don't you just come on out? And I was like, even better.
Yeah.
So
I want
here we
the
are.
full experience.
Yeah. So here we are.
There's certain things that are irreplaceable about in person.
Yes. Well, I think just what you said, this is what I understand about you, is I want the full experience.
Yeah.
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 I'm here for the full ride.
Yeah. That seems to be that. If that seems to summarize all of my understanding of you in a nutshell, is there's something that you sense going on, and you don't want anything between you and the experience of it.
Yep. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And I want to become the bridge to those experiences for anybody else who is interested in those things that I discover. This feels like a deep part of my dharma, is to be that bridge to different ideas, states of consciousness, experiences, ways of thinking, ways of being, more importantly.
Yeah.
And so I'm all about it.
Totally. And it seems like that's what I've noticed with your podcast. It seems like you've gotten into a rhythm, at least from my observation, of going and doing these experiences and then showing the impact and talking with the teachers. And is that what you mean by one of the ways of being a bridge?
Yeah, that's it.
Yep.
But the key is to be as radically honest and vulnerable as humanly possible, right? Like to expose as much truth, because if you do that, everybody can see themselves in you. If you just project some version of yourself, they may not identify with that version, but if you show the entirety, they'll be able to see, oh yeah, I get it. That's me too.
Yeah. Yeah. This speaks to, speaking of vulnerability. Well, actually, what do you mean by vulnerability?
Vulnerability is the truth. This is the truth. It's not any show and tell, costuming, projection, putting on a face, a mask, an avatar. It's just the truth. It's what is. And being willing to expose what is, because what is tender. It's vulnerable. It's really you.
Yeah.
You project something, someone criticizes the projection.
Yeah.
If I'm playing a character, they don't like the character, I'm like, oh, well, they didn't like that character. But if I'm me and they don't like me, then they don't like me.
Yeah.
It's still their own story.
Yeah.
And that's what you just have to understand. It's still their own story. But the truth is, that's what's scary about it. That's why it's vulnerable.
Yeah.
Because you have to bear the brunt of direct criticism to your essential self.
Yeah.
And a lot of people aren't willing to do that.
Right. And what has you willing to?
Love. I love people. Even when I forget sometimes. But ultimately, that's it. I know that this is of service, and being of service, people get service wrong. They think it's about what you're giving to somebody, but when somebody receives your gift, that is the gift to you. It's in the very moment that you're giving, you're receiving, if you're doing it right.
Yeah. Yeah. So putting yourself out there, you used the word exposure, 2 words, so vulnerable. And you said vulnerability is truth, right? And then it seems like part of that is putting the truth out there. But when you say the truth as it is versus what else, like putting on a character or some version of inauthenticity, when you truly say the truth about your own experience, you're immediately exposed, or you can be exposed. And so what makes that risky is that if somebody criticizes you, right, they're, rather than a role that you're playing, you can't just brush it off.
Right.
Right. It comes right at you.
Right.
Yeah. I'm curious for you about this experience of, as you've gotten more and more visible, right? Because you are putting yourself out there and doing things that I can imagine a lot of people, right, they're risky.
Sure.
They're getting less risky, right? Especially with the psychedelics and all that kind of stuff. It's like that's becoming a ton more accepted, which I imagine you're a part of, and you probably seek to be a part of that, right?
Indeed.
However, you are bringing on people on your podcast that are talking about different ulterior metaphysics and all kinds of stuff, right? That you're connecting with on some level for anybody to see. I'm just curious, like what's that been like? Like what kind of arrows have come your way, if there's been any?
Yeah,
and what has that been like? Yeah.
I started talking about ayahuasca probably 11 years ago, and it was made a big splash. I did it on the Joe Rogan podcast, and immediately just started getting attacked, being called a druggie. Go back to the fucking jungle, you druggie. You hippie. So I was a druggie. I was just a drug user, a drug abuser.
Yeah.
That was the kind of the first volley of arrows, followed closely by the second volley of arrows, which was when I started this supplement company. Then we're making supplements on it. And I was a snake oil salesman. I was conning people and tricking people into believing that these supplements could actually have an effect. Now, of course, at that point, when it first came out, we didn't have the double-blind clinical trials and the studies to actually show that the supplements we were creating were actually effective, like empirically, objectively effective. Yeah. So that helps mitigate it, but it was hard. It was hard to feel the first volley of arrows, it felt unjust. It felt like, this is not true. This is not true. Ayahuasca is not drug abuse. And these supplements I'm not conning anybody. I'm making the best supplements that I know work. And if you don't like them, you get your money back, and it's not a con. And so that hurt a lot. Yeah. The first time that I received all that, I went to a really, really dark place. Unfortunately, I had some good friends and mentors who helped me out of that,
And so you did that before you started your company?
No, the supplements were the company on it.
Okay, got it.
And it was kind of around the same time that I started talking about ayahuasca and started the company. So I got arrows coming in multiple different directions right from the start.
Right.
And they haven't stopped. It's just different arrows now. It's right now, I have a beautiful community I call Fit for Service, where we go through different transformational practices like breath work and different coaching programs. We bring people together, and it's having an amazing effect on the people who are participating. It's like really a life-changing experience to have that communitas and have that shared experience. And that's made me, take arrows as a cult leader. Right? My coaching program has now become a cult. Right. Which is, I think, probably not uncommon. I think Tony Robbins has been called a cult leader, and so many other people have. Yeah. And really, we're the anti-cult, right? We're trying to teach people how to understand themselves better and then go forward in the world and carry something else different. So injustice, right? That's the thing that gets me how dare you? This is not true. How dare you? So there's that voice that comes, but also with my experience, a deeper understanding of, all right, I get it. Right. And then also the other aspect is I'm continuing to ask questions about the narrative surrounding everything with the pandemic and just asking these questions. And that's made me a conspiracy theorist and a science denier and all of these different things, which is also not true.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to raise questions that people are uncomfortable with at this
Right.
point. So the arrows keep coming.
Right. And what is it? I get the sense that the arrows that come at you now, you have a different experience of them than when you first got them. Like you said, it really hurt the first time.
Yeah.
Like you needed some friends to like kind of to support you and to keep standing up and not take it so personally. I would imagine. I don't get the sense. I don't sense fear.
No.
Around it. What's the difference? What's the difference that made that difference, or differences, would you say?
One thread of this, if we were just going to take one thread, you could imagine, like, let's say we were back in ancient times where there were actually arrows.
Yeah.
You know, and you were a young hoplite in some, Greek squadron or battalion. And the hoplites were young kids, 15, 16, and they would actually run through the ranks and they would throw their pilums, their spears, or the Roman in the Roman, army, throw their spears and skirmish a little bit and then scurry back, because they knew that they would be a little scared. They weren't seasoned, right? So the adrenaline pumping, like all of this, like, wow, this is really risky and I'm not used to this. And I think that was the start. I was young. I was a young warrior.
How old were you then?
Well, I was 30, so I wasn't that young actually in age, but in seasoning.
Yeah.
In seasoning, I was young. I wasn't used to that. And so I got, the wounds hit and I wasn't expecting them. I wasn't expecting it. And then you look forward to, that famous line actually from the movie 300, which is actually a line that was copied from the histories, where there was such a volley of arrows that one of the Spartans looked at another and said, and so we will fight in the shade. Like the arrows will blot out the sun. So we'll fight in the shade. And then he just kind of smiled.
Right.
I'm not quite at and so we will fight in the shade level, like I still like, oh shit, that's a lot of arrows, but I'm also used to them, and so I'm getting closer to that kind of place where it's like, I know that this is the nature of it and that I'll be okay.
Yeah.
I trust myself.
Yeah. I trust myself. I know I'll be okay. Okay. What's the okay that you're talking about? It's not, I would imagine something, your relationship to whatever it is that you're pointing to when you say okay, okayness. At least your relationship to it, I would imagine, is a lot different, more mature now than when you were 30 and the arrows first came at you with talking about ayahuasca and starting the snake oil business. Yeah.
Okay to me means, one, I think it's actually kind of going through Maslow's hierarchy to a certain extent. One is, are you going to be okay enough that are they going to come for your safety, your actual financial safety, that's one element that's quickly, like, the easiest to overcome. Okay, actually, they're not going to touch any of that. They're not actually going to physically attack your body. It's not going to prevent you from earning a living and providing for those that you love. And they're not going to remove your home. Now, obviously, there's situations going on in the world where people are speaking out and getting their bank accounts frozen. This is happening in Canada right now, right? So there is a level of people are not okay now. I talked to one of my dear friends in Chilliwack, and he knows somebody who's just working a basic, pretty much minimum wage job, and she donated $50 to the trucker convoy and got her accounts frozen, her bank accounts frozen, right?
Yeah.
So that's not an arrow. Of course, like social media will shoot arrows. How dare you support these people, whatever their narrative is. Yeah. Those are the arrows, but those are the arrows that are landing on a different place. But now they actually are attacking safety.
Yeah.
So, but that's not the spot that I have any worry. So then another layer is your viability I'll talk in the first person, my viability to be able to impact the world in a positive way. Like my ability to live my dharma, which is to share my thoughts and my opinions and everything that I want to share with the world. The ability for the world to pull that away from me, to be silenced, canceled, those things. So that fear hasn't been fully resolved, right? But I'm getting a lot more comfortable with this idea that the most violent form of canceling that we'd seen in our kind of culture. First of all, I'm not on that bleeding edge of doing things or saying things that are to that extent. Also, the culture is shifting, and you're not forever punished and silenced for some thought you had or some belief you had.
Yeah. We're having a few cycles of watching it that you can get plummeted and you can kind of recover and
right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And even as I said, Joe Rogan's been brought into this conversation because we were friends for many years and still are friends. And I've been on his podcast over a dozen times. And I mean, that was a full-fledged attack, and some of it warranted in certain ways. And he acknowledged mistakes that he'd made, of course.
Yeah.
But they were unsuccessful in taking him out.
Yeah.
Like ultimately he's still going. Yeah. And of course it hurt. They mounted a massive attack. He had to acknowledge a lot of errors of ways of thinking and being in the past. But so there's a greater confidence in that aspect. They're not going to be able to stop me from being me. Right?
Yeah.
And then the final one that I think is still very alive is that it just hurts to be misunderstood.
Yeah.
It hurts when someone projects. I mean, if an arrow is a projectile, it's a projectile of someone's projection.
Yeah.
Right. And it hurts when that projection doesn't map to the reality that I know to be true.
Yeah, totally.
And it hurts the worst when I actually am not as confident in the ontology behind my expression of what I'm saying. So like I really notice that like I can have kind of a belief that I intuitively feel like, no, I intuitively feel this thing and I'll express it and then it'll get attacked and I'll be like, wait, did I really think through that all the way? Like, is that rock solid? Am I sure?
Yeah.
And if there's vulnerability in my sense of, no, I'm sure, like I'm as confident as I can be, there's vulnerability there. That's when the arrows draw the most blood.
Right.
Which is almost productive in a certain way. And it's actually been helpful. That resistance from the world has made me say like, okay, let me be really careful with my words and let me really understand the whole perspective here and share a very balanced and honest perspective.
Right. So there's, I just appreciated the way you laid out the 3 levels of okayness. We should like remember that.
Put 3 that levels of okayness. Yeah.
And I'm wondering about like this guy.
Yeah.
What is now I know you told me a little story about this, like connected to somebody who through your conversation and through Joe Rogan's podcast, right, basically cleaned up from heroin.
Yeah.
And he was an artist.
Yeah.
And this was the first painting he had done after he got sober.
Yeah.
Right. From, what was it, ayahuasca or was it Iboga? Yeah. Iboga. I just sat down when I sat in the office. I just sat here and I looked up and I was like, whoa, he did not let me go. Something going on there. Oh, okay. His world.
The shamans or the painter?
Like I would say the shamans. That world of okay.
Hmm. Hmm.
Because I know that you've spent a lot of time with shamans, and
Yeah.
In that world.
That's approaching a mystical level of okayness.
Yeah.
This is the transcendent level of okayness.
Yeah.
This is, I know myself as a being that is perennially okay.
Perennially okay. Yeah.
Like irreducibly okay. Like
Yeah.
there's nothing, just really invincibly okay.
Yeah.
And that's the identification as the part of us that is love.
Yeah.
That is love.
Yeah.
And at the vibration of love, knowing yourself as an emanation and expression of love, the most powerful force in the universe, love, truth, God, these things all get kind of woven in interesting synonyms. But knowing yourself as a unique expression of that love, then there's never a not okayness. Even your death is okay.
Yeah.
You know, and your pain can be pain, but it's okay too.
Yeah.
Because you can see the world through radically different eyes. And I've touched that place.
Yeah.
I've touched that
place. What's that place like?
Wow.
Huh.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's amazing. It's freedom. It's freedom.
It's pretty close, isn't it?
Yeah.
You just touched it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like you're free.
Free. Right. Right. Yeah. Felt like I just met you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or recognized you, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What is it? What is that you're feeling right now? Yeah.
I know that is true.
Yeah.
It's truly what I am and who I am. I'm free.
Yeah.
And the tears come in the revelation of the hidden truth. I've known it in some part of my mind, and I've even known it as gnosis with the G temporarily, but I forget often.
Mm-hmm.
And through this now, I remember again. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
This is a moment of remembrance.
A moment of remembering, and the tears are like, it's like when I don't know if people remember the Etch-a-Sketch, where you would create this little Etch-a-Sketch, and then you would shake the thing, and it would get clear again. And all of these constructs of vulnerability that I'd built in my mind in the forgetting, then get washed, and they flush out with the tears. And behind the tears is the remembering of this hidden truth. And that's always gets me to cry. When I watch a movie of somebody being heroic, of placing others before themselves, being willing to step into the fray for something greater at their own sacrifice or cost.
Yeah.
I'll always cry then. Right. I'll always cry because that to me reminds me of a part of myself that I know to be true that I forget.
Yeah.
That I am willing to show up like that, but I'll forget.
Yeah.
And I'll be in my construct of vulnerability and then I remember. Forgetting and remembering.
Yeah. Forgetting and remembering. I appreciated that just becoming really, really, really present. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's when I looked, I think that's, yeah.
It's interesting, I mean, this painting, and we'll show it on the video of this podcast, but I haven't looked as deeply as I am now. And I see him, and love is beaming from his third eye. That's all that's available. His hands are reaching out, but his eyes are actually not even looking forward.
Yeah.
And there's something really potent about the fact that he doesn't even have to look at you to express his love.
Yeah. That's exactly what strikes me is actually his eyes.
Yeah.
It's really interesting because there's this heart, and everything is about this point that goes right to his third eye.
Mm-hmm.
However, what looks out and grabs me
Yeah.
somehow mysteriously are those eyes that are looking to the left.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's the 360-degree emanation of love.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
that you know he loves you when you're not even looking at him.
Yeah. Yeah. I appreciated what you said about remembering
Mm-hmm.
and forgetting, remembering and forgetting. I think because what I hear in that, right, if I'm hearing you correctly, is it's not like exactly a discovery,
Right.
right? Like I know that for me the place that I think that we touched in on there, for me the first time I experienced it was, oh yeah,
Yeah.
remembering. That was striking.
Yeah.
Right? And there's something about remembering, which I think what you mean is that is coming back to recognizing the obviousness in which is already always the case, that I'm already inside of, that I'm already underway on.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
That particular sense is so striking to me, right? Because I've noticed about this with people that I've worked with, and clients that I've had, that I've in families and stuff like that, where I've just sat with for long periods of time and like worked through things, and had like fortunately I've gotten to be witness to looking right at somebody when that happens.
Yeah.
Right. And it is it, you got about a half breath notice beforehand. Right.
Yeah.
But you can't make someone go there. You can't orchestrate it. You can't, there's something there, but when it happens, it's on one level, it's so subtle. It's nothing that a camera could take a picture of, but it's so obvious of that moment of recognizing, remembering.
Yeah.
Right. And it's got this quality I've noticed, and I've noticed this with insights too. And I'm curious because it sounds like a lot of your attention is actually in facilitating courses now, right? Mm-hmm. You're actually explicitly teaching transformational courses, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I would imagine.
Yeah. That moment.
That
facilitating that moment.
Yeah. That moment. There's something for me that they have it and then I have it.
Yeah.
Right. And there is a quality too about, at an experiential level, it's not like I watch you have it. It's like we have it. Mm. Like as I was watching your eyes having that moment, like I kind of felt the same thing, whatever that same thing running through you, that's running through me, wiggled as well in that moment.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The recognition of who and what we are goes to really the first principles. This is not, there is of course uniqueness to who we are, and that's beautiful. It's beautiful how we all uniquely express, but the main substrate of who we are is the same.
Yeah.
And a lot of the remembering is remembering these things that are always true.
Yeah.
And that are true beyond our subjective beliefs or our subjective opinions about it. There's a truth that's deeper, and I believe that. And one of the beautiful things that I've learned through, the process of guiding people through these experiences is I can tell them that, we have come as love and we are love. We come from the same source, blah, blah, blah. Makes no difference. I can say that you or me living a different life. I can say that, and it's like, oh, cool words, nice thought, good sentiment. But then I'll lead someone through an eye gazing meditation, or they'll be looking at somebody and looking at their eyes, and then looking at the corner of their eyes and imagining all the tears that have poured out of the corner of their eyes, and the wrinkles from the times they've smiled and laughed, and the lines in the forehead from the times they've been in doubt and worried. And I guide them through this whole process, and then back to the eyes, and then back to the eyes, and what the nose has smelled, who the lips have kissed, and the heartbreak that's been expressed, all of these different things. And then all of a sudden we're just paying attention, which is, I think, a bit what this conversation technology is doing. It's like paying attention.
You mean circling?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's paying attention to different things until the truth emerges.
Yeah.
The truth is like an emergent property because it exists.
Yeah.
Because the truth is real.
Yeah.
And it emerges. Of course, there is our own interpretation of that truth, which is our own way that we use language. The moment we use language, of course, it's not exactly the truth, but there's something that emerges that's felt.
Yeah.
And I think that's the beauty of it. It's the beauty of circling. It's the beauty of any good, transformational container, is that you're allowing space for an emergent property.
Yeah. And that thing that emerges usually has that quality of what's emerging is what was already there. And part of the insight I've noticed about insightful truth, and I think this is Heidegger really, did a lot of work on this about the primordial sense of truth not being the modern one, which is, idea or mind and object and world correlate, right? We call that's the kind of the modern sense of truth or correctness. But his sense, I always really, really connected a lot more with his understanding of the original notion of truth, which is aletheia, right? And it's much. Now, he wasn't saying like modern notion of the truth bad or not true. He wasn't saying that at all. He was revealing the more primordial sense of what could even make that truth possible or intelligible is something ontologically prior to that, if you will. And so aletheia, Lathia, or lake, I think Lathia, lake, it's like a mythically in Greek mythology, it's like a lake. I think sometimes it's a river, but it means the river of forgetfulness.
Yeah, it's a
right?
river, typically the river before the river's like before Styx, right?
Yeah,
Something like that.
Yeah. But the whole the point is like, so if you fall in River Lathia, it's not that's like, so if Bob's walking along and he trips and falls in, people aren't like, where's Bob? Right?
Yeah.
No, it's forgetfulness. It's missing that Bob is missing. It completely goes away. So aletheia, or truth, is you could say, the event of that instant or that moment where what was totally forgotten is the instant or the happening of its unconcealment. That right? So it's kind of interesting if you want to do this, if you want to get at this, one simple way to get at this is if you just go into a room with a group of people and someone says something that rings true for somebody will go, and then you go, what was that? And then that person talks and then somebody else goes, what was that? And you can just follow. You do that enough times, eventually you reach this very, very, very deep place because it rings that bell in some sense. And of course, when you can imagine that, like when Bob appears, right, comes back, the people around him are, because for years and years, I used to think about like aletheia was about revealment, right? It was about what was disclosed, which it is. But really, the profundity, the mood of it, the happeningness of it, is what gets unconcealed, is concealment itself. it's like, you see in that moment that you completely forgot Bob for all of your life. And there's that gung, right? Good example of that is The Sixth Sense. You remember that movie with, he's dead the whole movie.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird. You don't know exactly what's going on. Something's kind of weird, but you don't quite get it. And then there's the moment where, like, out of the corner of his eye, Bruce Willis realizes, like, oh shit, I'm dead. And then he goes right back to the very beginning of the movie. And you see moment by moment in that movie that it was obvious the whole time.
Yeah.
Right? That sense of hiddenness, concealment, which is really striking to me about his eyes. There's something about that, right? Where I would imagine if his eyes were looking right at us, it would be a really different painting.
It would. I think there's something confronting about somebody looking directly at somebody and beaming that kind of, because it's almost demanding a response.
Yeah.
Like if you look right at somebody and you beam, like it's complete eye contact and you're beaming some level of consciousness, it's typically uncomfortable. Unless someone is fully willing to meet you there and they know what's going on. But, the painting doesn't ask permission for that, so it would be a little bit confronting, like, whoa, he's looking right at me, beaming this love. But by just kind of having his eyes aside, but directing his love towards you, it becomes more of an invitation.
Right. Totally. And there's something too about him gazing to the left. You don't really know what he's looking at, right? Somehow this kind of presence of, and this is one of the things, reading Heidegger has been a pretty big influence on me, and continental philosophy and that kind of thing, right? And so I've just come to appreciate this sense of withdrawal, the way that some of the most important things, right, insights are present in their withdrawal of what's most hidden, right? And I think what I feel appreciative of your work, right, and what you're doing, is in some sense you're building bridges to these different worlds, right, and you're showing them, right. But at one level, you are constantly bringing back things that can't ever be said.
Yeah.
Right? There's this quality of you're presencing something that will always be at the deepest level sacredly concealed. Right? And that orientation of that mystery and that sense of okayness that has been cultivated in and through you. I just appreciate that about what you're up to. And I've thought to myself, all the different paradoxes that you're encountering and holding and the different tensions that you're doing when you're talking about somebody. I think it was the one guy that you were talking about, you brought on that had all these memories of a past life. Oh yeah. Right.
Matthias De Stefano.
And I could, one of the things I just got with you is I just kept imagining what it must be like to be you, right? Right? Yeah. With arrows pointing out at you, all that kind of stuff. And that there's something that it just feels to me that, well, you said it's love, right? Is what has you do it. And there's also just a lot of paradox in what you're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And look, is it pure love? Is it that the only thing, the only reason why I do what I do? Of course not. Right. But if I excavate down to the bottom, that's what it is. But then on top, there's other motivations. I like being recognized. I like that people listen to me. This is the part of me that likes to feel like he's doing a good job. Like, you're doing a good job, boy. You're doing a good job. You know, the kind of proverbial father that I get to be to myself. It says like, proud of you, son. You know, you're really making an impact.
Right.
You know, so there's some validation seeking, of course, it's woven in.
Yeah.
But that doesn't win the day.
Yeah.
You know, like, and that wouldn't allow me to be the fullness of who I am if it wasn't for that thick, rich, you know, carpet of love that is kind of underneath it all.
Totally. I appreciate you saying that. In that part, what is your relationship to that? That part of you? You said good boy.
Yeah.
Right. I just remember too, there was a podcast. I don't think it was, I was listening to you, I think it was a couple months ago that you did, where you talked a lot about your early relationship with women, right? And that, that your girlfriends would be the ones that would be friends with you, right? But you were always going after, right, the ones, and you didn't have much social coordination back then or something, right? And it didn't quite work, and that sense of
it was complete. It was a complete failure. I never was able to date the girl that I really wanted to date until something shifted when I was around 22 years old. And so, man, I mean, I have reams of journals filled with heartbreak and poetry, you know, from this feeling of and the hopelessness,
unrequited longing,
unrequited longing, and also then projecting that out onto the world, that I was like, I don't understand, you know, like I don't understand. I've done everything I could to be the best young man, you know, that I could possibly be. And it's still not working, and I don't get it, and I don't understand. And I would see the partners that they would choose, and I'd be like, why him and not me?
Yeah.
You know, and so I was a big, big chapter. And of course, ultimately I realized that the big error that I was making was that with those women that I was comfortable with and didn't have that longing for, I was myself.
Yeah.
I was myself. I would joke around. I would treat them as I would treat any other person, any other buddy or whatever. And that's what's naturally attractive, and what's inherently repulsive is when you're putting on something that's more. I was being more nice and more, you know, hyper vigilant than I would be with anybody else. And that naturally was repulsive. And it was kind of a massive revelation to me when I realized, like, oh, the only thing that works actually, even in dating, is to be yourself.
Yeah.
Is for me to just be me.
Yeah.
You know, not put on any airs, not try to be a different version of myself. Nobody wants that. They just, they either want me or not.
Yeah. After that realization, did you know what it was to be you, to sink into it?
Well, I only knew it in relation to when I was very comfortable.
Yeah.
Like I knew the me that was really comfortable and not trying and not having any agenda. Yeah. Chogyam Trungpa says the warrior's decency is the absence of strategy.
Yeah.
Right. So like human decency to a certain extent with each other in relational decency is the absence of strategy. You have no motives. You're just there for the sake of being there. The Hebrew word is lishma, for its own sake. Like we have this conversation for its own sake. I'm hanging with you for its own sake, for that experience itself, lishma. And that was really the secret. Now I've gotten in different traps of that as well, because it's not just female relationships where they can feel that, you know, it's other relationships as well. You know, so if you get around somebody and you have some motivation, I remember I'm pretty good at that. Typically I'm pretty good at relaxing into being myself, you know, but the times I remember when I was a young entrepreneur starting out in the journey, I really idolized an entrepreneur named Bob Pittman. And I was comfortable being around a lot of, you know, successful, famous people.
So you grew up with, in your family, you grew up with, your mom was like
she's a professional tennis player. My dad was a commodities trader. My stepdad was a SWAT team squad leader. And my stepmom was a nutraceutical doctor for all of Pat Riley's basketball teams. And Tina Turner and all kinds of, it was like an interesting, wild experience where I was used to different people. But when I put somebody on a pedestal, then at that point, all of a sudden I start acting differently, and then the relationship doesn't form, And so with this guy, Bob Pittman, I got a chance to meet him on this, I was at this Summit Series boat excursion thing, cruise ship thing. And it was like, I was so overwhelmed that I wasn't able to be myself. And he was very gracious. He was like, "Oh, nice to meet you." But I could tell that there was whatever that thing is that comes when you're really in resonance with somebody.
Yeah.
It couldn't form. It couldn't attach.
Yeah.
Like the piece, it was like a spaceport where it's like, it couldn't lock.
Yeah.
It couldn't lock because I had too much static.
Yeah.
And too much fuzz.
Positive projection on him. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the same with any type of relationship. And I feel that too with certain people who, come to me through my coaching programs, through Fit for Service, and they'll have that thing. And I love them for that. I don't judge them for that, but it does prevent the spaceport from docking.
Yeah.
And then there's other people who don't have that. And it's like, sometimes it'll just be like, it'll click in. I'm like, whoa. And then they become friends.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you ever find out who that woman was that you were perpetually after?
It was so many.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't mean the specific woman, but just that, in objects relations, they talk about the object, the object relation, that there's the object of pull and then the subject with a kind of, in their terminology, with a binding affect, right? Did you ever figure out like what was?
I love this question. I'm gonna be patient.
Yeah, please.
With it and allow it to work with me a little bit. Some part of it was some there was a physical dimension to it where there was a level of attraction on the physical side of things. There was an allurement that was particularly strong.
Yeah. And
then another part of it was, I think, exacerbated by the elusiveness. It was the thing that could be chased.
Yeah.
So it feels that it was a combination of allurement and elusiveness.
Yeah.
And both of those things, when they were the strongest, then that's when I was the most engaged.
Yeah. In that sense of, I think what I meant was, who was and I don't know if this is the case or not, but it has me wonder about, who was the one that was elusive for you? Like historically, who is the one that super attractive at some dimension, whether it be like a man or a woman or an object of some kind, but as elusive that had that kind of affect to it?
Obviously the normal answer would be to say like my mom, but that's not true. My mom loved me so consistently, unconditionally, every single fucking day.
Yeah.
Like, I'm so grateful that I had the model of that unconditional love from that aspect of the feminine. Same with my grandma. I have her tattooed on my arm, like that whole line.
Oh, that's your grandma?
Yeah, it's my grandma.
Oh, wow.
So that whole lineage from my parents was like that. Now, where I can feel the threads going back is my dad had a subscription to Playboy. And so from when I was young, probably way too young to look at Playboys, but he was pretty, I don't want to say careless, but he didn't care about leaving them around so clearly. And he also wasn't, uptight about especially Playboy is different than Hustler. You know what I mean?
Totally. Yeah, mine put his up in a closet under. I found him though.
Yeah, of course.
Right, of course.
Of course.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I remember like the Playboy centerfold, as this like elusive object of my desire. And I think there was some kind of valorization of this elusive feminine muse of some sort that was always driving me. She was the muse. She was the one that was drawing the best out of me.
Yeah.
When I was playing basketball, of course I wanted to for my team and for my parents and the school and myself, but there was always the muse who might be watching. Yeah. When I wrote a poem, there was always the muse that might be reading. Yeah. When I accomplished something in business, there was the muse that might be paying attention, or there was the experience that I could offer based on the abundance that I'd created. Like always there was the muse. Yeah. And what's interesting is my wife was the ultimate muse. I met her at Burning Man, and really
the one that you're married to right
now. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And the ultimate muse. I mean, unbelievable singer, dancer, all of these different aspects. And I was in love for a long time before we actually got to be together. And it was also the same thing. It was, I'm not going to get the one, even though I'd had a lot more success being with a different version of the muse. I've had some beautiful relationships, but she actually kind of called back to that time where there was the one that I really wanted to be with and I couldn't.
Those feelings,
those same feelings kind of came back in full force with her. Yeah. And then of course the story gets to the happily ever after, which is the marriage, and it actually worked. And then now we're living and rewriting this Disney narrative with, okay, now what happens after happily ever after? Yeah. How do you keep the relationship in that same level of intoxicating allurement and attraction? Yeah. In a committed container. Right. And what must you inherently allow to shift? What can you use technology of different sorts, tantra technology or spiritual technology or conversation technology, to actually maintain those, levels, that the things that you don't want to lose about the muse that I was chasing. Wow.
So there's so many things rich things that you just said that struck me. And one of them was the way that you presenced the girl that you could never get, that was always breaking your heart. On one level, it was a girl, at different girls throughout your life, right, when you were younger. But you talked about, she was also a gaze, that where this ever receding possibility could happen, that watched you. You dwelled in a gaze of her. This is really striking to me about your relationship with this sense of, it feels very archetypal. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
It's just striking to me. I mean, in some sense, you could say that much of your development, it sounds like, at least from the teenage years, right, while that was happening, you were developing yourself within that gaze in some sense.
In a very large sense.
Wow.
I actually can pinpoint one of the most dramatic moments of where this really crystallized. I think I was 19 and I had a fake ID, and it was a really good fake ID. They used to have fake ID stands here in Texas where you would go in as a kid and just put in your age and get a fake ID from like fucking Hawaii, or I think mine was from Louisiana or something like that. Yeah. And they would just print them for you. It was ridiculous.
And then on
the back of them, it would say not a real ID, but it would look like an ID. So even if they turned over, they wouldn't see the words. Yeah. But anyways, I got one of those. And so I went to Vegas. I was 19. And I got into this show called La Femme, and it was at the MGM Grand, and it was a copy of the Crazy Horse burlesque show in Paris, which is this famous, beautiful burlesque show with projection lighting and these unbelievably gorgeous dancers doing this burlesque routine with beautiful music. And I remember I was by myself there, and I ordered some whiskey, some Crown Royal, I think I was drinking back then. My older stepbrothers got me into drinking whiskey, probably too young as well. But I was drinking that, and I was watching these gorgeous women, dance seductively.
Yeah.
And I just remember like just tears starting to well up in the corner of my eye. And it was like this vow as I was like, I will do whatever it takes to be the type of man that could ask one of these girls out and she would say yes.
Right.
Whatever greatness I must achieve for that to be a reality, like I will achieve it.
Yeah.
And it was like this culmination of things that I've been feeling before, and then this crystallization of like, this is the driving force that will drive me to my greatness. And so it was a huge part of what drove me to, but I wasn't trying to cheat the system. I wasn't trying to make shortcuts. I recognized that it must be greatness writ at large, as I didn't know what the thing would be, but I knew that if I was great in every aspect, if I was great in my heart, great in my body, great in my mind, great in the universe that I'd created around me, the abundance that I had, great in all of these different things, then I would be an irresistible force to the goddess, to the muse.
Yeah.
And it drove me for a long time.
Your respect for the feminine feels deep.
Deep.
Yeah. Yeah. It struck me when you said, well, it struck me actually what you said, but also what you didn't say to yourself in that moment. Like, you didn't say, I'm going to do whatever it takes to get her. Right? Which I think is probably a lot more common. Like, let's get in that is some kind of craving having mode. And I'm not saying that you weren't craving, right? But you went, you saw her and you went, I'm going to be the kind of being, right, that could be good enough, right, for them, essentially.
Yeah.
That seems very different than this.
Right.
Right? I don't know. What's it like hearing me just articulate that, if that feels accurate?
Deeply true.
Yeah.
Deeply true.
Yeah.
It's not I want to capture them. It's not a prize. It's not something that I want that love. I want the eros as our as Mark Gaffney would say, right? I want that experience of like, let's get in rapture together, whether it's conversation or laughter or experience, like that thing, that connection with the feminine of like, we're on the inside together. Yeah. And of course, sexually, that can be one way to get on the inside, but it's only one way. Yeah. Yeah. I've started recently I apprenticed with a master body worker, and I did a full week-long immersive apprenticeship, and it was like I was remembering a skill, remembering a technique that I'd already known. So it came on very fast, and I was able to very quickly understand it and then practice it, and then also mold it to be an expression of my unique self in totality. And I've never been a gifted healer of any sort, and I still wouldn't necessarily call myself that, but nonetheless, this practice came online, and it's very, very powerful, and it goes very deep, and it feels like it's accessing a part of me that's the truest essence of who I am. And so I've offered that to a variety of different, people, friends in the kind of the inner circle. And I've given my male friends the body work and the experience, and I enjoy it. it's good. It's but for whatever reason, and it's not a sexual thing at all, but for whatever reason, no matter when I'm giving it to one of my female friends, there's something that is like alivened in me and awakened in me of like being in service to the feminine.
Being in service, yeah.
And like being able to allow my essence to like allow the flowers of their heart and mind to bloom and spirit to bloom in a certain way. There's something that a part of my being like deeply revels in that.
Totally.
And it's actually more satisfying because I was polyamorous for many years. And of course, sexuality is beautiful. And I've had a beautiful relationship with it, but there's something even more.
There's a moreness.
Yeah, there's a moreness. There's even greater fullness and fulfillment in that experience of offering the body work.
Yeah, and I could sense that you were like, that was speaking to you all the way back when you were a teenager.
Right.
Right? Probably like a lot less like understanding or ability to even comprehend what was going through you. But even then, sounds like you responded. The unrequited love, you responded with poetry and aching, and
that's it,
right? That sense of it. So it seems, I'm just appreciating there's a mystery here,
and I will say
here in you.
I will say that there has been a shadow of that as well, and the shadow of that would be frustration with the feminine for not allowing me to give what I know I have to give.
Yeah.
And stopping me at the gate.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just here with love. Like, I'm here with poetry and flowers and love.
Yeah.
And I'm knocking on the door and they're like, you can't come in. And I'm looking through the window and there's someone in there that's just pillaging and, destroying the inner castle, the sanctum of that individual. I'm like, what do you mean I can't come in? Do you see what this person's doing? Like, I'll help clean up that mess. And like, I won't do that. And so but the frustration of being on the outside for so many years there is also like a subtle undercurrent of resentment, that I've had to, become aware of. That's there as well. That came from
where do you become aware of that? Like now, how does that come up? Is it like just kind of noticing certainty where you get irritated, or
it's not necessarily that. I think it actually winds its way into some, fantasies or dreams or things that I'll have where I'll like this desire that's been unrequited, then turns and like actually craves like a different relationship, like a power relationship with the feminine. Right.
Yeah.
Fortunately, like my introspection has been able to track this, and it's a mild thread, because ultimately my life has been beautiful, but it's given me enough awareness that even in me who loves the feminine so deeply and has such a deep, beautiful relationship with my mother and my grandmother and has had such a beautiful, so many beautiful relationships, I still love like all of the exes that I've ever been with. Like, there's never like one of my best friend, the best man at the wedding, we're going to redo a spiritual wedding, was my former fiance, Caitlin. There's so much love. But even then, my own frustration has kind of shifted some of my attitudes towards sexuality, some ways in which fantasies have come in. And just noticing those threads, then I extrapolate, well, if in me, who had it probably easier and better than most humans on this earth, like I can understand this kind of toxic shadow of the masculine who's very frustrated at the feminine for the unrequited, the desire to, I just want to love you. And then you get shut out of the door.
Yeah.
And if that happened over and over and over and over and over again, then what is the monster that's built? Because now I got like a little pet, like little kind of, pet little guy that's actually fun. And my wife loves playing with that guy. Scratches it under the chin, is like, come out, little wolfie. And I'm like, and we get to play with it. It's like, it's become like a beautiful aspect of the totality of me, but it was forged from like a bit of getting shut down and then being like, how dare you? Like, and so it gives me, I think, a lot more sympathy for men at large. Doesn't excuse any behavior, of course. Like transgressive behavior is transgressive behavior, and it's not excusable. But to excuse and to understand are different things. And to empathize with that.
I'm imagining, does this take you? Are you working in the work that you're doing now? Because you sold on it. Although you're still subleasing an office here, because you just like being here. Is the main, where a lot of your attention, is it going into this is it a company? You call it a company?
You could. I mean, you could. It is like, from a legal perspective, a structure.
That does courses.
Fit for service is kind of
fit for service.
That carries its own kind of brand, I suppose. But I guess I'm resistant to call it a company, because that puts a financial end on it. And while it does have a financial component, it's also, it's somewhere between a business and just the service that I want to give to the world.
Yeah, totally.
So, but yes, it is technically a company.
Yeah, because I'm imagining, like, now you have this, because it sounds like you've spent a long time, years now, participating into ayahuasca ceremonies and all kinds of stuff, meditation things, like experimenting, going deep in on it. Like, I have this picture in my mind that something's happened here now with your organization, right? Where you're now you're standing in the healer role, or you're standing in the facilitator role. And that seems, is that, and so in this thing that you just noticed, this twinge of resentment, right, from that, and then looking, as you said, appreciating that you've suffered with this comparatively very, very little. So just feeling it, the tinge in you, and then imagining it with other men who suffer a lot more of this, right? You can, now that you have this place where you can work with people and bring that up, has this become a forum for you to start bringing your own creativity and your own leadership and wisdom to bear?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We just had a recent Fit for Service summit. It was a 2-week thing with a 3-day in-person event, and it was called Road to Union, and it was 60 men and 60 women, and it was talking about all dating and relationship dynamics. And that was why we did the eye gazing practice that I just mentioned, and some different breath work practice, some different things, and then also a lot of coaching and a real world challenges out in the world to get past your anxieties, different things. But everything that I'm grappling with and learning, I get to share not only through my social media or podcasts, but also in real time, and feel and see the transformations. We had our closing call for that container yesterday on Zoom, and it was a 2-hour call, and I was like, all right, well, I'm here to answer any questions anybody has. I'm here for you guys, and if you want to share anything, just make sure you share the wisdom of what you got, but really try to keep it to questions. Well, I got no questions, and everybody was just pouring out gratitude and appreciation for what they experienced. And overwhelmingly, and it was making me really emotional just to receive it. Yeah. But overwhelmingly, it was women saying that they've never encountered the masculine in this way. Yeah. They've never felt
Yeah.
They've never felt the safety
Yeah.
and the divine masculine of like, I got you and I'm not trying to take anything from you.
Right.
And I'm just here to listen and I'm here to, hold the wildness, lightly.
Yeah.
And like that kind of feeling with my own strength. And I think so many women were like blown away by that. And I think it's a beautiful kind of reclamation of what it means to be a man that can be strong and, and powerful, but also gentle and kind and aware and conscious and thoughtful.
Yes.
And it made such a deep impact on the women who like received that. And it was just beautiful. I mean, and that's to me, like the beauty of that is then like it's magnifying what originally I wanted instead of me being the only one that gets to love the feminine. Now I'm helping cultivate a whole group of men.
Wow, this really this is full circle in a big way.
Yeah. Yeah. And now it's those that are gaining some traction and maybe whatever small amount or large amount of wisdom and confidence and expression through what I've been able to offer, then now offering that back out to the world.
Wow.
It's beautiful, man.
Wow. And you have a team that you work with, right? A core group of you call them your family.
Well, so I have, So the beautiful part is that I have, there's 4 coaches that are the main core coaches for Fit for Service, and they happen to be my best friends. And it's, so there's Caitlin, who's my best friend, going to be my best man in quotes for the wedding, who is my former fiance.
When are you getting married?
We're going to do it probably in the fall. I mean, we already got married by Elvis just for like technical reasons and COVID, but because everything was crazy, we kind of put off the real ceremony. So that'll be probably in the fall.
Great.
And then there's, Kyle is just a epic mountain of a human, former UFC fighter, but the sweetest, like tenderest guy on the inside.
Yeah.
And then Eric Godsey, who's just a brilliant Jungian psychologist, and then my wife, Vailana, and we're the core team. And so that is absolutely, family.
Right.
And then there's the extended family, which is some of the other people who are just dear friends who I don't work with, like Christine and Stefanos are going to be there, Makata and Frida.
Yeah.
So no work affiliation with them, other than they come in as guest coaches sometimes in the Fit for Service program, or I'll do something for them, or but yeah. So the family has there's different circles of the family, and then there's the intersection of the work family, and then there's another entire series. I mean, everybody who really works for me in any capacity, we always blur the boundaries between like work and friendship.
Yeah.
And some people advise against that, but I'd prefer not to live in a world where things have to be separate like that. Like ideally, we're trying to create a new model for the world, and that model is it's okay to, it's just more of a confidence that people's inherent nature is good.
Yeah.
And that they don't need the control mechanisms and the distance and all of the things that you typically have in order to do a beautiful job.
Right.
But nonetheless, they still need to do a beautiful job, and I still have to terminate people, even if they're friends.
Yeah.
And that's for the greater good of all.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting balance to maintain, but it makes life and work just so beautiful, because a work function is hanging out with my friends.
Yeah.
And that's lovely.
Totally. And do you guys do in your core circle that does the courses together? Do you guys have any practices that you guys do together? Do you guys like meditate together? Do you go and like have a therapist come in once a week and like what?
Not that frequently, but we're always together. So we participate in a lot of the experiences that the rest of the group does. So I'm often in a facilitator role for the different group, and then sometimes there'll be other guided facilitation that will come in, and then and sometimes those people who are interested in a psychedelic journey. A lot of us went down to Soltara. Most of the team went down to Soltara, which is a ayahuasca retreat center in Costa Rica.
Yeah.
And we all did ayahuasca with Maestro Orlando Chuandama, the El Dragón de la Selva, the dragon of the jungle.
Right.
And we drank ayahuasca together.
Yeah.
And talk about a bonding experience.
Yeah.
Drinking ayahuasca together as a team. Now, obviously, ayahuasca is not for everybody, and this is not a prescription.
Right.
But fucking potent.
Yeah.
And in that
Super
situation, obviously, I'm not facilitating. I'm doing my own part to keep it together.
Yeah. Right. Totally.
When in the journey. So
totally. So there's a sense in which I get what these guys you're talking about, like, although you're leading the charge, like, you could surrender into them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And they can take over when need be. And there's that.
Yeah.
There's an implicit bond there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what happened with On It. Like, ultimately, the current CEO, Jason Havey, we started off, and he came in and had a kind of VP position, left his dream job, which was to be the general manager of the best hotel in his area in Green Bay, and or Madison, I think. And was like, I want to come work for you. And I was like, well, shit, you're overqualified for most of our positions. Like, I don't care.
Yeah.
It's like, all right, well, we'll start here.
Yeah.
And our relationship just developed stronger and stronger and stronger until it got to the point where I could absolutely trust him to execute everything like this shaman. I didn't even have to be looking, and I knew that he was carrying out the heart and the mission and the impeccability by which I would lead, he was going to do. And so all I needed to do at that point is come in and offer my magic on formulation, relationships, marketing ideas, different, concepts along that, but he could handle the rest. And so before we sold the company, I stepped down as CEO like a full year, maybe 16 months before. I'd already stepped down as CEO because I knew that he could handle it.
Yeah.
And he could, and he can. And it's beautiful. And that's now developing on my team as well, where it's getting to the point, but that took years to build. And with this team is still, even though they're friends, they're still young and new. And it doesn't happen, the transmission of how to carry this forward doesn't happen immediately.
Yeah, it's not linear either.
No.
Yeah.
But I can feel it forming, and I'm like, oh boy, like, this is exciting.
What are the things that you've noticed so far that have it form? Right, because there's one, and I hear this in the background of what you're saying. It's like you can set the conditions for it, but there's something that just ignites or doesn't, right? Forms or doesn't, and it's not mathematical. No, right? Well, what are the things that you're noticing that encourage that formation that you're talking about? And so you're having a second formation now. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. It's their ability to have a shared perspective. Yeah. So it's that
perspective knowing,
yeah. It's that I can trust that they would look at a series of, because all information is just like data, but they could look at a series of data of like feedback from customers, the way things are happening, a problem arising, all of these inputs, and they could perceive the inputs like in a similar enough way that I would perceive them. That I'm confident that my vision can be carried out. Yeah. Even if I'm not there or I'm not looking.
So that's the key. They can intuit, sense your particular unique frame. Yeah. And know how to respond to all the different situations that you couldn't have sat down and given them a playbook, right?
And it's not possible.
Yeah.
I can just lead by example. It's almost like you lead by example. I share my opinion and my perspective as often as possible.
Yeah.
Always listening to everything I do then becomes their opportunity to mimic that.
Yeah.
And then understand me in a greater way.
Yeah.
And then execute on that.
Yeah. I tell you, from circle, I'm sure we'll talk about this more later when you and I have our conversation after our thing, but the reason why I'm asking these questions, because I've just appreciated in my own experience, having founded circling, and we didn't know how we did it exactly, right? We just did it. And a lot of trial and error, but like refining and getting, what was this thing that makes it circling, and like going to the left and right, and it was messy and, and all over and then at a certain point when we needed to train people to do it was the first moment that Jerry and I realized we had no idea we knew how to do it, right? And we couldn't quite, at that time, we were pretty young. We couldn't quite admit that to ourselves, although all of our students knew it.
Yeah.
So we just circled the hell out of them, right, for 2 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then over time, I was able to start to abstract out like the underlying logos or logic of what we did, right? Which through doing that, I just got a lot of respect of how difficult that is. It is really difficult, right? To know how there's some of the to know what you don't know that you know, right? And to bring that into language to teach it is really difficult to do.
Yeah.
Right. I think for most people. And so I'm imagining, and right now we got it down to the point where actually we have things broken down, like enough chunks, and I'm constantly reading, I'm constantly observing, and it's still telling me what it is, which makes a big difference. But at the end of the day, like to be able to circle, which is basically to be able to respond profoundly, right? In the way that you would respond profoundly, right? Not the way I would, right? That's the key. Isn't a skill. I think it's a capacity.
Yeah.
And the big question the big mystery is, how does one help develop a capacity, right? And I think that I'm just hearing that you're starting this part of your journey. You're teaching people courses. You're having a team, right? You're kind of bringing in your own thing, probably influenced by all the stuff that you've done. So I'm just listening to like hearing how you do it.
Yeah, it's particularly challenging with this enterprise because I like the fluidity of direct contact with people. And so we'll come up with ideas, but it's really, everything is always subject to feedback and to intuition and feedback. And so it's hard to write out a list of, I wrote out basically the logos of what we stand for, which was kind of then is adopted as our personal ethos.
Yeah.
We called it the Arete ethos, how to capture excellence in all of these actions that we do, and basic principles. Like one principle is there's always a third door. If you're presented with a binary set of options, we can either do this or this. It's always false. There's always another way if you look. Like don't fall victim to binary thinking.
Yeah.
Like know that there's another way out. It's the classic Captain Kirk Kobayashi Maru story. There's another way. Yeah. Always, even when the world presents you with two. Yeah. So things like that are teachable, right? And those make a big impact, right? Because we'll hear people talking about that, whereas formerly they would have thought of things in a binary way. Well, I can do this, or I can't do this, or oh, well, I can't do anything until this person gives me the assets, And it's like, no, that's a false premise. Yeah. Like, what is the third door? Yeah. Like, what is the other way? And maybe you don't want to take that third door. Yeah. But don't pretend that there isn't one. Yeah. Don't pretend that there isn't some possible way that this could be done in a different way. So some things like that are teachable, and it's really helpful. And I'm glad that, we put that out. And then other elements are, it really is. It's just the capacity to listen and intuit and move from a place of service and place of love, and then apply your own solution to the issue.
Right.
And that was something that was beautiful. That's something that's beautiful that arises, like even in my apprenticeship, my bodywork apprenticeship.
Yeah.
Really, the key thing that he did was, number one, he taught me how to listen to the person's body
Yeah.
and get in a conversation with it. And we do this kind of rhythmic shaking where I'll grab the feet, I'll pull the feet, and I'll shake, and I'll look at the body, and the body, it sends like vibrations up through the body.
Yeah.
And I can feel and see. Sometimes I do it actually in the pitch black, so I can't actually see. So I just feel where I can feel that there's energetic blockage, in the tissue.
Right.
That's the most important thing. And then he showed me his solutions for that. And sometimes I apply solutions that are very similar to his solutions. Mm-hmm. But sometimes I just intuit my own solution to the problem.
Yeah.
But the key thing is that we're both reading the same. So if me and my teacher came to that body, we would both sense the same problem.
Right.
And we would apply potentially similar or potentially quite different solutions to that problem.
Yeah.
Based upon what our own skills and intuition is to that. And I think that's the key thing, is to get everybody to identify, like, okay, where is there an issue, opportunity?
Yeah.
And then the solution can be a variety of different solutions within a parameter of effectiveness.
Yeah.
But I think it's key to just be able to give them the assessment tools.
Right. So it sounds like you're teaching them how to see.
Right.
And you're teaching them how to listen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. How do you do that? How are you finding that you do that when you do that? Because it's interesting to think about that. If you alter the way I see, then you alter everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you alter if I start listening differently, you change the world for me, right?
Yeah. Number one is I see and I listen to them the same way that I would want them to see and listen to other people in the world. So
you demonstrate it.
It's really the best way is if they have something that comes up, they get to see me navigate it. Yeah. And then also if I make a mistake, if I let my emotions, get too present so that I'm speaking through an emotional lens, then they get to see me come and acknowledge that and be like, hey, just want to let everybody know, let you in on all of the things that were going on, my own thoughts and feelings and what this touched in me and why that was there. And this is my acknowledgement and apology for that. So they see me handle things internally, which gives them an idea. It's not about being perfect. Nobody will. But how do you respond to your own, misgivings, failures, whatever you want to call them.
Yeah.
And then also they get to watch me, listen to what the situation is demanding.
Yeah.
And how I respond. And they're quick learners. They're learning really fast, which is beautiful.
Yeah.
Because they're starting to kind of know how I'm going to respond to the situation before I do.
Yeah.
And sometimes they're wrong. Sometimes they'll get, there'll be a couple things in a row and they'll think they'll create a heuristic to understand the mechanism by which the way I decide things, and it's a heuristic, but really actually I was individually listening to each one of these situations and coming to the same conclusion, but there is no heuristic. It was actually individuated and listening. Yeah. So then, Aubrey's going to say this. And I'm like, no, actually, I'm not.
Yeah.
The situation is different.
Yeah.
And I'm listening differently.
Yeah.
So it's almost that from the meta perspective, it's being mindful of your heuristics and mindful that each situation must be handled from kind of an internal sense of an ethos and a feeling.
Yeah, totally. It's funny as you're saying that, like there's the question that I have that's there for me if there's not a heuristic, what is there? What is that thing that organizes, right? All of that, right? That you transmit, or somebody kind of picks up or they don't pick up, right? What is it that has you know what to do and the way to respond?
We're now bridging into metaphysics
Yeah.
to a certain degree.
Yeah.
We are participating in an interconnected field.
Yeah.
We're participatory in a field that is always connected.
Right.
And the field can inform the individual consciousness.
Right.
Because it's inextricable from the individual consciousness. We are
Right.
always participating in the field in a bilateral giving and receiving information. So what it really is it's actually, it is really just listening to the field. Yeah. It's listening to the field without your own particularly perspective shifting biases, without looking through different funhouse mirrors of your own glasses.
Yeah.
So that you're really listening.
Yeah.
And this is a skill it's applied to a big group, and it can be applied to a conversation. Like to know when you're telling a story, like this is the funny thing that I mean, this is really hard for me. We'll be at a dinner and somebody's telling a story and the story isn't landing and it's just banging on, you know. And I'm thinking like, you're just not listening to the crowd. You're not listening.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, and I get more and more uncomfortable as I feel the discomfort in my carefully cultivated dinner crew.
Yeah.
And then, you know, oftentimes as I'll politely make a joke or kind of break up the conversation and try and gently without like, hey, why are you, you know, without being up too blunt and obtuse with how I express, but kind of try and steer that back in. But it's the same thing with a larger group. It's the same thing with an individual. It's like, are you really listening? I think that's why I'm so drawn to circling.
Yeah.
When I did it with John Vervaeke, it was like,
Yeah.
whoa. And I'm obviously multiple times in this conversation, I'm feeling how beautiful that technology of listening. It's like conversation body work in a way.
Right.
It's like you're really listening to the entirety of my psyche
Yeah.
as I express, paying attention to gestures, intonations,
Yeah.
words that are interesting. And it's, I think you can teach a lot of it, but some part of it is intuition and a feeling of things. I imagine of course we'll learn a lot more in the days coming up. So I don't want to, speak ahead of myself, but that's what it feels like.
Yeah. Listening. Yeah. I'm so glad that you're saying that about listening. To me, listening is it continues to be one of the most profound mysteries. Like, I had a teacher once that he basically, a friend of mine, Ron Bynum, who basically kind of co-created Est for all intents and purposes with Werner Erhard.
Mm-hmm.
And he just befriended me. And he took me under his wing, and like I'd go up to his house and he'd load us up with acid, and we'd go through all of the original Est conversations, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is they were like an existential, ontological drama. Right, the whole thing was about that, and he had ADD, and he had a big shadow, but he was just this brilliant guy, and he would just start conversations. I remember one was, "Let's talk about listening." It goes like this. All right, fantastic. Tell me about listening. Let's talk about listening, and then that would end up 3-4 trips up there. Extended in this conversation about listening, with both of us crying and these detours, and the whole experience was something. But there's something that he said to me about listening. He's like, "Guy, what do you got to get about listening? Such that if you don't get this about listening is not possible." And I was like, and I just started to think about it, and
I picked up some vocabulary along the over the years. So I started saying all my smart things, and we were walking in Healdsburg around the town square. We must have circled that with him going, "Nope, that wasn't it. What do you got to get about listening?" Da-da-da. Nope, that wasn't it. And at some point, he grabs me and he looks me right in the eye and he says, "You ready? The thing you got to get, that if you don't get, listening is not possible. That thing you got to get is you don't. You don't listen." And it's like you can feel it just kind of break apart, and you enters in, and it just starts to crack, and that has just kept cracking and cracking and cracking for me, right?
Yeah.
Because it's really interesting about like, because I personally pay a lot of attention to just learning and education, because I work with, I'm working with training people and groups, and some of this stuff is really obscure to even to bring words to, let alone help someone facilitate something or see it. So it's like, I think I'm going to be thinking about this and learning about this for a long time. But you're right, listening seems to be, well, especially, it seems to me that ontologically speaking, all speech, right, presupposes a listener, right? Like you can imagine listening without speaking, but you can't imagine someone speaking if it wasn't called forth by a listening. And so what's interesting about communication things that have always struck me is like when you go to the bookstore, most communication books are about what to say. A lot of them are all about what to say. It's really speech heavy. But the thing I've kind of humbly keep learning over and over and over again is that, no, it's like speech, if you can hear, right? If you can really, really hear, you will respond in just the most appropriate way.
Yeah.
And it's a function of your fittedness of listening, right? Such that your speech can come into harmony and co-fit with what you're hearing. But here's the thing though, especially in America, right? We don't listen to our listening. We really don't notice that no one hears each other, right? Like, but the moment that you hear that, oh my God, I've known you 15 years and I never ever actually listened to you. I never heard you. The moment you get that you don't listen is the moment listening, the domain of listening opens up. And it's funny, it keeps being like that. I've noticed this is like, it's not like listening is something you can teach someone how to do. Like, how do I tell you how to listen? It's more like you set up the conditions of it, and then you notice the moment of hearing was realizing that you hadn't heard, and now you're hearing. It's this constant breaking all of your pre-listenings and over and over and over and over and opening up. And it seems like if you do that over and over and over again, that you can tune into the world, and then all kinds of things are talking that you had never heard before.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So I'm
Beautifully said.
Yeah. So I'm just appreciating your words about listening and what you're up to, and getting more of a sense of like what you're heading into in this part of your life.
Yeah. Yeah, there's no listening is a vector that goes to infinity. There's no point where you will achieve perfect listening. Like, because I think in some ways you could say it goes all the way to God.
Yeah.
Right? It goes all the way to God.
Yeah.
Like, there's so much that you can listen to on a deeper level. There's the little parts of the buzzy parts of the psyche or the emotions or the feelings, and then there's the deeper, the longings, the needs, the desires, the unconscious, subconscious, then all the way down to the actual animating essence of the person themselves and what they're pulsing and craving, you know. So it's it's beautiful to actually recognize, like, listening is not a destination, it's a journey, and it's a open-ended question. How far can you go?
Totally.
How deep can you listen? And at what depth of conversation can you get to? And and a lot of that you can't even, when you're in the deepest listening, the moment you try to explain it, it's like a psychedelic journey. The moment you try to explain it, you're approximating the listening. And also the moment that I apply a solution to the listening, whether I'm listening to a body that's on the massage table or I'm listening to an audience collectively, the solution that I'm applying is not perfect. It can't be. It can't be a perfect solution to respond to what I hear, because I can only offer my own approximation of that, you know. So it's just, this is the practice. This is like, it's a beautiful practice. It's the most beautiful practice, because as we learn to listen to others, we learn to listen to ourselves. And when we learn to listen to ourselves, know thyself, right? This is the core tenet. When you can really know yourself deeply, then you circle back to the mystic level of
the verticality,
unfuckwithability,
horizontal intimacy, and opening up to the verticality. The dialogos. The other thing about listening, which has really been interesting to me, I wonder what you think about this, is, so as I'm talking, right, at some point, for whatever reason, if something I said struck your interest and you started to have a thought, right, and you started thinking about that thing, and then at some point you'd probably go, whoop, and I come back, right? And you focus on what I'm saying, and then you'd have another thought. Boom. Boom. This thing about thinking and listening seems to be directly coupled. And the implications of that seem quite, kind of getting this really helped me understand, I think, more about the profundity of what listening is. Because I think most of the time, people who want to become listeners, they have kind of a folk mythology about what listening is. Listening is something like being quiet until the other one, just timing it right, you know, such that you're quiet until the other one is speaking, and that somehow, like, the ears, you used to be good listeners, like to be an open head, and then to be filled up with information, right? And if I stay quiet, then that information that's in there, all the bits get into here, and then I heard you. But I don't, phenomenologically, if you really just pay any attention to listening has nothing to do with that. It's because if you think about this, whatever it is that thinks, right, can't do it when it's listening. And whatever it is that's listening can't listen when it's thinking. There's this unity between thought and listening. So when you think about that, I mean, what do you hear? This deep coupling.
Yeah. It reminds me a bit of like a meditation practice. To a certain degree. Like, you will never meditate and have a thoughtless meditation. But, you know, I have a mantra meditation practice. And so the thoughts come, and then you go back to the mantra. And back to the mantra. And then that gives you, and there's a way in which the listening part can be the mantra, and then the thoughts can come and arise. And then there's also the responding part of it, and that's the conversation. So, because you can listen to a book, or you can listen to a podcast, without any desire to respond. But there's hearing a podcast or reading a book and listening, like really, really taking it in a different way that takes a different level of almost focus from not a trying perspective. Not like it's not like the, focus on this dot or this one thing or just the air through your, it's different. It's like, it's a full immersion. Like you're soaking a shirt in saffron dye, you know, and just like letting it seep in. Yeah. And I think the most beautiful aspect of listening to me is when you get to be on the inside of the person who's expressing. Like the listening is a doorway to union. Yeah. Is a doorway to like real intimacy. Yeah. If you're really listening, you get to go on the inside of them. Yeah. And then you get to feel them and be them for a moment. Like be one with them. And that's when you're really listening to each other.
Yeah, totally. It's like, it's also kind of like to think that listening to you is there's that which I think in me. And then to really listen to you is in some sense to let you think my thoughts, which is really interesting when you just let that kind of percolate and think about that for a second. And especially if you think about this is like, there are some thoughts that if you really have them will change your life, right? There are some thoughts to genuinely think that thought involves a presupposition to genuinely think it, that it could be very different than the one that you have. Yeah. Right. And if you shift a presupposition, everything changes above that. Right. So it's really interesting to think about this thing, listening and thinking, right? Because in some sense, I've really gotten to know this in circling, come to realize like circling, the intersubjective part is like listening is the transforming agent. Because on some level, like really, really sensing through the particular suchness of what you're saying, tuning into the moreness, responding to that moreness, and in the response, asking you to say more about it, right? In some sense, there's a feedback loop going on where we're thinking. There's a certain kind of a sense of an indwelling. We start to indwell into some kind of unity, right, that takes place.
Listening is dangerous.
Yeah.
It's dangerous to your separate self.
Yeah.
Because it is a form of union. And it starts to unravel the identity construct itself. Yeah. The identity construct of different beliefs of separateness, of beliefs of being different than, and being able to hold yourself in the righteous position of judgment of other. Yeah. And I think that's why we have this poverty of listening, this meta crisis of listening going on right now, is because we've been so lost in our separate self, in the righteousness of being better than somebody else, that if we actually started listening, we have to sacrifice that element of our identity to the altar to die and be reborn. Right. But we don't have faith that it'll be reborn. It's just the death that we're afraid of. We don't have the understanding of, okay, maybe that idea will die. But something else will always emerge and reform. My identity cannot be destroyed. It can just be changed. Yeah. So there's nothing to actually fear. Yeah. But we have to learn that, like really learn that it's okay. Yeah. It's okay to listen so deeply that you could emerge from that as a different person entirely. Yep. It's okay. Yep. You're going to be okay.
Yeah.
You know?
Totally. It's also interesting to think about listening. If you follow the etymology back, comes from hearkening, right? It's the Greek word, and my understanding is that it's a kind of hearkening. Means it's kind of like in the deepest sense, obedience. And it's interesting because, I mean, when I first heard that, I was like, I wasn't expecting to hear that. Like all of my dude Western thing, like cringed at it. But the more I've thought about that, the more that it actually makes a lot of sense in, at least to me, in that I think the kind of obedience that they're talking about, if you think about what it takes to genuinely, all the way down, all the way to your toes, obey something, that's not something just you just let go and have something take you. That's not obeying. Like obeying is a kind of, has such a reverential quality to it, right? I think it can only be done from one's own freedom. Right?
What to you is the flavor difference between obeying, submitting, and surrendering?
I think obeying has I hear a couple of things. It's like I have to pay attention moment by moment, right, with obeying, right? But there's something must already predispose it or presuppose that I trust whoever it is or wherever I'm paying attention to find myself obeying at that level, right? But it's kind of got this, it has an auditory quality to it, right? Where I'm really, really, really listening. It's kind of the way that John talks about this. He's got a good way of talking about this, like the classical epistemology, which is where they just took the world as being intelligible, and therefore knowledge was about a contactful and conformity with the world. That's why, like, as you go back further in history, you see things like philosophy had rites of passages, right? Because it required deeper levels of reality. That conformity required you to transform. So it's like the knowledge was synonymous, was with your transformation. And I think one of the local closest places I would guess that that's possible is when you're sitting in front of another human being and you just get interested in their life. I really go for the ride of who they are and really genuinely open. You're listening so much so that you're open to being affected, like open to being a completely different person as a function of really, really hearing them in that sense.
Yeah. What I feel is an active participation in obeying, which is slightly a different flavor quality than surrender. You know, there's almost like surrender can be this extreme passivity of like just letting go, but also letting go of your thoughts and then letting go of your focus and letting go of your attention. But there's almost an aspect of you that stays engaged with obeying, like, which is constantly being aware of new micro demands that are being made and recognizing them and being aware of them and obeying, rather than just surrendering in its totality, which is different. And I like that. I like thinking of it in that way. Obeying is certainly, it's a more challenging word than surrender, you know, but with that though, it's more beautiful because it's more powerful in a certain way to willingly obey. It's not just I obey and disagree because I'm afraid, so I have all kinds of internal resistance to what you're saying, but I'm going to follow what you say. Like, be home at 10, you know, daughter. And they're like, fuck, I got to be home at 10 because I'm going to get grounded if I don't. That's obeying. But it's not obeying. It's not really obeying. There's internal resistance. But what you're talking about is like the divine articulation of obeying, which is obeying the micro demands of that and really like being on the inside of it and paying attention.
And like the moreness, because that's the thing about a human person. Like if I'm really, it seems to me that like I've never reached the bottom of anybody. Right? I've never been like, I've tried. I mean, I've been pissed off, right? Like, but I can't sum up. I've never been able to sum anybody up and put a period in any way that there's when you look at another human being, there's like a moreness that seems available, right? And a suchness to tune into. That place where the moreness, the particularity of the suchness, there's that sweet spot where it's like the suchness comes into such particularity that it becomes transparent to something beyond its form. But that beyondness is the very thing that affords the suchness, and that auto-poetic reciprocal opening, right, that can start to open up is to me is like, that's listening in this
Goes
big
all the way to God.
Yeah, it really does. It's good getting to know you, my friend.
Likewise.
Yeah.
Likewise.
Really enjoyed this conversation with you.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
More to come.
2 days.
Yeah. 3
Sweet.
actually, because we have a podcast on the 3rd.
That's right. Sweet.
Yeah. Thanks for being here. Thanks
You
for the
bet.
work you do.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Yeah.